Hello, welcome to this portion of the AOCS meeting. I'm Scott Bloomer. I'm the Director of Technical Services at AOCS. And we have a very special treat today. I'm really excited to see this talk. Gerard Klein-Essink is going to be speaking to us today, and he's the founder and CEO of an organization called Bridge to Food in the Netherlands. I haven't known Gerard very long, but he's really impressed me in a number of ways. One of them is that he's a very high-level thinker, and he really likes to see possibilities. And the other thing that really impresses me is that it's obvious that his brain is wired to make connections. And so he'll get a piece of information, but it's almost like in the background, you can almost see that he's thinking about all the different places that connects to. So he gets this really high-level holistic map of things. And so I'm really pleased to introduce him today and looking forward to this presentation, Research Investment Agenda, Plant-Based Foods and Proteins 2030, Developing the Roadmap. Gerard?
Thank you so much, Scott. I sometimes have the feeling that maybe I think like a woman where everything's like going on in your mind. But I'm very pleased to be with you, and many thanks and great compliments to Scott and Amy and the team for pulling this off with all the good services and connections. My presentation is about the Research Investment Agenda 2030. We're at the beginning, and I'm going to show you how we got there and actually how maybe you could also contribute. Now, Bridge to Food is around since 2002. We have a full plant-based food focus, and we have worked with many different organizations in the last almost 20 years. And it's always been a great pleasure to work with people. And that is really at the core and the heart of the company. So we have different type of activities, exhibitions for startups, summits for leaders, conferences for research, ecosystems, and that's the part of the presentation that's most interesting, I think, for now. And we're running some courses as well, all in plant-based foods and proteins. For this year, we have 2 research conferences, one next week. I'm very happy that Scott's going to be with us to talk about your role as AOCS in helping to raise the bar for the world. And we, I think, have a good opportunity to collaborate there. And that's fantastic. And another research conference is in September. The one in May is also a bit about dairy-free, which is quite novel, but also about analytical methods. Now, how did we get there to the roadmap? That all started in 2019 in Canada, when we started working with around 40 organizations, which now have grown to 110 and plus 250 experts. It's called the ecosystem. The green colors are showing that we really have the value chain together. And what is the aim of the value chain when you are together? Well, let me show you. The aim of the global plant-based foods ecosystem, as the partners have formulated, is to accelerate the transition towards a more plant-based diet with better foods produced in a sustainable way, as well as increase food security with an abundant supply of proteins for food, feed, pet food markets. Challenging number we started with in 2019. Let's raise the bar and go for 1 billion in public-private partnerships by 2025. I'll explain a little bit later how we could get there, because it's not too difficult to get there like anything. So when we got together as this value chain partnership, we asked everybody, what connects you? Where's the right space? And they came up with actually 6 different factors, which today is still very much the case. And it's not outdated. It's even getting more clear that these are the challenges. Product quality, taste and texture. Having better foods, you need to work on taste and texture, of course, with the crops as well. Nutritional value, very important. Product conformity, I'll come back to that in a second, which is about method analysis and standardization. Valorization of the full pulse. Are we going to go for clean label and for all the ingredients in, or are we going to strip all the pulses into the different streams? What do we do with this waste streams? Can we still justify to maybe our kids or later on to our neighbors that in 30 years time we would ship starch from Canada to China to be used into noodles, or that food quality fibers are going into pet food streams or other streams? I'm not sure. Anyhow, that's a challenge. Life cycle analysis, sustainability, And last but not least, the value chain connectivity. And that is really so important to understand each other's position, because if you don't understand the other's position, you cannot really work together and raise the bar. So I'll come back on the product challenge, and then later on I'll build it up to the research agenda and the roadmap. For the global conformity challenge, we really are very happy to work with AOCS. And now it's all about standardizing it and getting it going, making it happen. Now, what did we say when we started the conformity challenge? What's the idea? Well, the idea is to define and agree on a minimal list of criteria required to characterize a protein source, reviewing existing methods to qualify these criteria and call for new method development if needed. So if you look at the dairy industry, the meat industry, or the bakery industry, 100 years old, they have all those things set. What is it in alternative proteins, or what is it in plant-based foods? A lot of things are not existing. And if you are Nestle and you're getting two different plant protein competing pea protein, you'll see that they do use different methods for functionality, different methods for analysis, etc., etc. So scaling an industry, it's so important to have criteria that you all agree on. You can save valuable time. Now, so what's the problem? We asked everybody, okay, well, there's no consistent use of the same criteria methods to characterize the ingredients, as I mentioned. What's needed to turn the gridlock situation into a positive opportunity? Agreement on the method between the partners. And then why would we want that? Well, if we have this, then we can benchmark all the ingredients. So if there's a new, maybe cannery seed protein coming to the market, then we don't lose time. We help the industry at large to say, okay, compare it to these methods, and then it's much easier to kind of go forward. The project in itself was defining a list of criteria to characterize them, different phases: first gather, analyze, and then write. 31 partners were actually involved in this exercise. They all contributed, and they did a lot of hard work. They analyzed many different methods, and they quantified them and also characterized them into 5 main groups with 37 sub-criteria. These were the leaders of the different groups that were saying, okay, shall we have a good look at composition, then on aggregation, functionality, sensorics, as well as nutrition. And it was a big pleasure to see everybody working together. Now, here's a very quick overview about what came out of it. For composition, it's the request for a revised method. For aggregation, denaturation state, development, different. When you look at functionality, it's very much for requesting a method for development and validation. For sensorics, there's not a lot of data available. If we want to go forward, you need to get the data in place and gather the data before you come up with a method. Nutrition, there is also a need for more data publishing. At the moment, actually, we are looking with Jim House of the University of Manitoba and saying, okay, if we have vegan products, how can we justify that there are animal type of methods being used to test the digestibility? That's a no-go zone, and we should really change that. This is where we are, and this is what we want to change and what we will work for. But of course, then you need data. So the analysis has led to a gap analysis, and that's where you need data. The methods will be published in one of the magazines, the Critical Reviews in Food Science and Nutrition. I think over 300 papers have been analyzed, so massive work, all done in 9 months with everybody. That was a real nice experience. So what can we do beyond this exercise? And after this exercise, of course, it's collaborating with AOCS to see that it's more data are gathered, right? New methods are suggested, but also that some of the stuff that is in the space of changing it can be implemented at short notice. So we thought as a group, can we actually do more than collaborate, see if we could start projects together? A lot of projects have started already in the pre-competitive space, public-private partnerships. Companies have put money on the table to work with Wageningen University or with an organization called NISO or other organizations. So this ecosystem is a very vibrating environment where everybody's looking for how can we go into the white space and possibly together, preferably, because you need to connect the dots between the different parts of the value chain, and very much, I think, do where you're all too small for, but collectively you can get there. So the moonshot, and which is a bottom-up and a top-down process, and we wanted to look much more beyond 2025 into 2030. Now, then it's very important to understand, if you look at that, and you really want to make a difference in the transition, you have to think about not just a method, but there's many more stakeholders here in this area who could have an effect. And not all of them are here listed. For instance, the value chain, where's the consumer and schools and other things. So really, there is a massive amount of work to do, but we started with actually maybe the value chain, the industry at large, to look at what is possible to do. And with that kind of roadmap, the agenda and the roadmap, it's a step process. In Europe, we have already decided that the ecosystem will work together with the European Plant-Based Foods Alliance. There's many different organizations in this network. GFI and ProVeg are the ones that are maybe more connected to the consumers. Actually, ProVeg, GFI is more industry, but it means that what we want to have is a collective group of organizations that can support an agenda. And if you have supportive agenda, you have impact. And where do you want to have the impact? In this case, we want to have impact in Europe, because if we have a plan and a direction and a vision, then it's much more easy for the European Commission to say, okay, we've got big research projects and a lot of money available. Let's follow you in terms of the direction. And then, of course, you could make things work for you rather than that you are waiting for plans that are developed by somebody else. So taking the step forward, being proactive. So the moonshot, shocking moonshot for, of course, because at the moment we are maybe at 40% plant-based, 60% animal-based. And we think that it's possible to go to 70-30. And that is not just, of course, with changing the quality of a product or getting some more research money. It is having all the actors and stakeholders there. I'll come back to the agenda in a second, what will be in the agenda, and to give people the perspective about what else is needed. So, but how do we do this? I think what we want to do is that when we do this moonshot, it has to be a farm-to-fork approach. Point number one, it's science that's needed. It's a food systems approach. And of course, there's a lot of international input and endorsement that's needed. And by all means, we take all the sustainable development factors, the goals that have been laid down, the 17 factors, into account, because that's where actually we all measure ourselves in the future of the planet. Guidance, direction, and input for a far-reaching agenda for plant-based foods and proteins. The investment agenda will be able to be used by different stakeholders. And what we will do is we'll include a budget proposal. So we won't limit ourselves into saying, okay, if plant-based foods for dairy-free have to be better for cooking purposes or taste or color, you know, that know-how you can use it wherever you are around the world. Or when it's about looking at a certain crop, then of course there are crops for oats also grown in Australia, not just in Europe. So we hope that we could help all sorts of organizations in different parts of the world in order to be able to scale. And we see that now many different regions or provinces are also developing their plans. Province of Bavaria, a beer province, looking at what can we do with the protein transition. Well, you can do something with the side streams. You can change the meat sausage for a vegetarian sausage, but it takes a lot of time for these people and organizations to get an idea. We hope that our documents can help to get there. And actually, we are already implementing what we are talking about versus new projects, primarily in Europe and in Canada. The proposal of Jim House with regards to nutrition and the method development will be also backed up by the ecosystem one way or the other, as well as in Europe and the Netherlands. So how does such an agenda look like? Well, we've got a few chapters before chapter 5. They will be about taxation, regulation, also about consumers, and also about the industry at large as well. If you want to know globally what's the industry like, well, you can't really find data. There's market research, but it's not data accepted and approved and endorsed by the industry itself. There's some data in the US, there's no data in Europe. How can you, of course, go on a bigger agenda if you don't have your act together by having the numbers in place? And then you can really show what kind of impact you have as an industry for society. Chapter 5, 6, 7, and 8 are really about where we are working on in our ecosystem. So we will have a look at the diets itself, performance nutrition, actually bioavailability activity, diets as well. Chapter 6 will be, okay, how much money will be needed to really bring meat-free or dairy-free or egg-free to the next level? On chapter 7 will be about, okay, what is needed at maybe the level of, for instance, a new crop like lentil. If we want to scale lentil, of course, assuming that the functionality is also good enough and you can do things with it, and there's enough things to do, but maybe some place with, as far as we can see with lentils, a lot of people don't really know about the functionality, and there's no lentil isolates on the market or very limited. So there's maybe other things that you need to do even with the existing crop. But in some cases for oat, maybe it could be trying to increase the protein level, so that we could make more use of the crop itself when you turn it into a plant-based food product. Sustainability is chapter 8, which is really very much about also looking at processing, low water, no water, or low energy, low side streams, etc. And we also think that the ecosystems as such are also very key to be able to scale and to form new networks that can have impact. So we've done a little investigation ourselves to show you how, again, bottom up, top down, for dairy-free, for instance, we are working. We've done an investigation around all the people in the ecosystem. And here in this case, there were over, I think, actually 25 challenges that everybody had formulated in the scope of dairy-free. We rated them and we tried to find what is really the key research question behind this challenge, be it texture, be it improving cooking, and other fields as well. And with that, it has helped us to say, okay, now maybe if we then are looking at the real research question behind texture, which is maybe rated quite high, what kind of real research questions are there, and how long would it take, and how much money should be needed to maybe get there? So my last slide for this presentation, I'm not sure in time where I am, but that's the last one, so we have maybe a bit more time for questions, is the invitation to you is join us if you are from academia. We have a lot of academia in our network, but we not very active at the moment in the US, and we welcome everybody to come in, to support and to share, to learn from industry. I think that is what industry would really like to contribute to academia as well. Pick our brains, go for it, because then we can scale. And if you have any ideas that are not listed, not being discussed, or questions, feel free to come to us and you can pitch your project. There is a lot of money in the system at the moment, and a lot of organizations are looking for good science. They have difficulties in understanding worldwide where all the research is, where are the novel ideas. So feel free to be part of this, because we are starting with this roadmap. We have started with the roadmap, and the idea is by the end of this year, we have something that is really tangible and we can share with the bigger world. But I doubt whether everything will be done and will be finished, because this is also work in progress and learning from things that have been implemented. And also in the research space, there's so much going on. So this is not a static thing, it's a dynamic situation. And that will be for the coming 10 years or way higher. Here are my contact details. Feel free to get in touch anytime. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gerard. I really enjoyed your presentation. We have a couple of questions that have come in. The first one as you become more familiar with AOCS,
Mhm.
have you observed a need in the plant-based foods ecosystem that AOCS is uniquely suited to meet? How can we promote
Mhm.
your activity?
Mm. Yeah, I would think there's many parts to this question. One of them, I think, is very hands-on. We've submitted some data. Well, there will be a paper, and with the paper, I think you could help a lot by getting it into a standard format with all the organizations you work with. This is not our field of expertise. We have no reputation, so it's wonderful. Vice versa, maybe there are questions in your network, right, in AOCS, where we could help to scale because we might have different industry players or we are working in different areas where you are not as strong. And this is where we can find a common path to develop and to grow. And you are very well established. We're young. We're the young kid on the block. So I think you are, yeah, you know a lot more than we know.
Well, we've been around since 1909, so,
That's right.
and I believe that you and I are similar in that we both believe that there's so much work to be done. We have to work together.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. The next question is, there are two more questions now.
Mhm.
This one says, excellent initiative, thank you. What is the role of farmers, for example,
Mm,
pulse crop growers in all this?
mm, mm,
How will they capture value as the main
mhm.
supplier of raw materials?
That's a
What is the
fantastic
role of,
question.
uh,
Yeah, and actually, there is probably one of the most important roles for many different reasons. If you all look at them in relation to the Sustainable Development Goals that we all are embracing, right? You're working with farmers working with soil health. You work with all sorts of other factors that are very important. You have unique crops. Uh, the next point I would like to mention is that um, actually we started doing this ecosystem with Canada as bridge to food, and there were a few reasons why we did that. One of them was that I strongly felt like if you really want to improve things, you have to start with the food industry and then work it backwards to the farm. So it is farm to fork, but in this case, the dynamics in this industry are very much at the food side. So if we would have 100 years or maybe less, right, 50 years, it would have been done like maybe in the dairy industry, the meat industry in the past. There were many farmers, they all had some money on the table, associations were formed, companies were formed, etc. But now the dynamics is in the food, and the food industry has a problem at large. They have a problem with the value chain. They have a problem with standardization. So what we said, let's first get the industry together to put them into the leadership position and help them to guide the whole value chain, ingredient companies, processing, and also the others. So we are now almost in that phase where we've worked on the foods, and now we want to look at the crops, and then from crops to food, and from food to crop. And where do both meet? To give you a very practical example, if you are in the Netherlands, and probably it's no different in Germany to being in the US, what are the food manufacturers saying? Well, we would love to source more local ingredients. But where we are now is that we see a lot of different qualities of peas or fava beans coming into the processor of the textured proteins. So if we want to use textured fava beans big time, we need to have a standard product. So what's the connectivity between maybe the farmer and the uh, processor of the fava beans to maybe a fava bean ingredient, which is then used by another company to turn it into a textured protein? Well, this is you know the holy grail, and the holy grail is not far away, but we can only do that by classifying the raw materials. Maybe in some cases the crops haven't been grown specifically for meat free or for dairy free, so you can further look at varieties, add more value to the farmers, and have more appreciation for what they do. And now you can see very often a gap. So we are working as Bridge to Food with Protein Industries Canada and Pulse Canada. They are parts of it. We love to have also the US organizations being involved in it. And what we simply need to do, probably with AOCS, as well as with maybe universities and analytical organizations, say, okay, roadmap, we need to have very good tools that we can characterize the crops maybe at the field before they go to the processor for the ingredients to turn to textured protein. And this is something that nobody can do alone. But if you have the buyers there to say, oh, this is so important, then you have, of course, end users. So hopefully that gives you a view on how we look at things, and that we're almost even more than before ready to go in this direction. But then again, I can tell you honestly that, you know, we are with the 110 organizations, so probably we will need 30 or 40 pharma type of organizations or pulse organizations to have impact, not one or two, but make a plan. And I'm sure that the US Dry Pulses has already a plan, right? We haven't really spoken to them plan-wise. Where's the synergy? We do have it a little bit with Pulse Canada. Way too low, slow, by far not enough, but step by step, and please come to us.
That's a great answer. I can see you have a grasp of beginning to end. That's I'd love to talk more about this, but there's a couple more questions. So
Go ahead.
So this is one that says, are you working with or interested in working with farmers and processors in sub-Saharan Africa? Animal proteins are really expensive and many diets are starch-based.
Yeah, well, you touched me by my heart, to be honest. I'm a member of Bounty Field, an NGO related to General Mills, working on post-harvest processing in Africa. My son has been in Malawi as well, where I wanted to go in 1992 myself. There's a personal interest, and we very much like to have that, but we don't know how. So if you have ideas how to do that, I'm sure that there's a lot of organizations in the processing or in the research, because universities are working there. Wageningen University has a lot of work going on. And some work needs to be done in breeding. And I think I remember being in 2010 in South Africa, and there was a professor from the US winning the food prize, Nobel Prize. And he said, actually, you know, what we really need to do is train on crop development for maybe sorghum in Africa. So there's loads of work to do, but I'm also sure that there's enough people who are interested to help to get there. So it's actually getting the band together, the Blues Brothers.
Well, I don't know if you're aware of this, but AOCS had a conference a few months ago called Soybean 360, and it was focused exactly on development of crops in Africa. So
fantastic.
If you're interested, we can send you a link to the presentations. I'm sure that would be interesting to you. One more question, and this says, are there lessons to be learned from wheat whose quality attributes are classified? And could we apply the wheat matrix to pulse crop qualities?
Yeah, well, a very interesting question, very interesting point. I know a little bit about wheat, more from a yield perspective, that it's how it has developed since the 90s, but by no means I'm an expert in this field. We have some companies in this space, but I think what we don't have is on the other hand the agriculture part, and on the other hand maybe the breeding part that is connected to it to really change things. Some of the breeders are working with Pulse Canada, so maybe I think it will be a good suggestion maybe to contact US Dry Pulse or Pulse Canada to see what they've done, because a lot of work has been done already, right, in classifying varieties and looking at breeding. And now there's new technologies like AI available, and also CRISPR-Cas is available in the US and Canada. No, I'm afraid I'm not suitable to answer your question better than this.
All right, well, here's another question that's come in. It says, thank you very much for describing the initiatives. The review paper you mentioned is a significant task. Could you please describe the next steps in the plans for the methods of characterization of plant proteins after the publication of the review?
Yeah, I think I very quickly went through the 5 things that we've done, right? Functionality, sensorics, nutrition, etc. Different scales of implementation. And for nutrition, with the NRC in Canada, we're going to have a look if we can have some money on the table to do all that comparative work that's necessary. That's for nutrition. For sensorics, I don't actually know the details enough to say what will need to be done. So for which one was the review of the method? I think it was the conformity, no, the functionality. So there is some overlap, and I think we're very much at the beginning of doing other things other than this. And I can tell you already, one of the things I would love to have connected to this, which is something which is very new, but and it hasn't been done before. But imagine that you are really wanting to work in a sustainable way. Why is there, as part of a specification, not a metric for an LCA value? And not an LCA value by doing this and saying, you know, we have general remarks, but there are methods and tools available now via blockchain that you could say, okay, this is a set of data with farmers. We agree that this is the water input, all the old land use, etc. And this is a set of data that we can pass on to an ingredient company. And then if you buy that as a food company, you have a full integrated part of it. But that's even a new part of it that we thinking of starting. But again, we can't do this alone. And we very much like to see if others can help by bringing this forward. Technology companies that have those platforms, or maybe other organizations that have done it. We've recently, for the LCA part, and it's going to be published probably as well, Pulse Canada has outsourced a project to a Dutch consultancy agency to look at all the LCA values for pulses in Canada, the crops. So that's great work, but the work for the ingredients hasn't been done yet. And maybe the reverse question would be, you know, what is important for you? And feel free to give us other suggestions that you think are relevant.
Well, thank you. That is all of our questions, and I can tell that you live with the burden of the visionary. That you see this potential, and you say, if only these people knew that, and they knew that they could go that way, and you can see this low-hanging fruit for all these other people, and then you have the challenge to communicate and convince. So you have my respect. It's a very difficult challenge.
No, it's okay. It's okay. Well, maybe one of the things that, as this is also a learning platform, I learned in 1992 when I was based in Singapore, the following lesson from my Australian colleague. At that time in Singapore, the Deli France was coming up. You know, this bakery store, right? And before you would buy bread, and then the baker really put a lot of energy and time into making it with all his experience and know-how. But then Deli France was using bake-off bread. And my Australian colleague said, well, it's all about de-skilling the operation. So if we de-skill all this stuff, then it's much easier for everybody to get access to it at universities or with industry or between the different parties. And that's, I think, the big challenge for the future if you really want to make steps forward.
Well, thank you very much for laying out this roadmap for us. And I look forward to future collaborations.
Me too.
And thank you so much again.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.